Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. It's an exciting day to be on the show with us. This is our third episode in our Rough Draft Venture series, and we're here with the co-founder of LearnLux, Rebecca Liebman. Rebecca, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
As I was saying, I think you have had such an amazing journey. I'd love if you could kind of take us through a couple of the stops along the way so far.
Ooh, okay. So I'll preface this. I did not prepare, guys. I think it's better that way, right? Very raw. So I think, okay, a couple specific points. First, I'll start off when I'm 8 years old. And I was in Girl Scouts, and I remember being at a Girl Scout meeting. We were doing a craft, and everyone was given the same materials to build an end product, which was the art and craft project. And I built something that no one else did, and my Girl Scout leader yelled at me, and she was like, no, this is what we're making, like tissue paper flowers, and that's not what I had made. That was the first time I realized that I wasn't going to answer questions the way everyone else answered questions and do the same thing that everyone else did. And I think ever since then, I've kind of been using the resources I've had that everyone has, but to create something different. And then probably the next milestone was when I was in high school. I was taking an earth science class, and we had to calculate how much energy we spent ourselves. When do you leave the lights on? Do you use a hair dryer? Things like that. And I calculated the energy that I used, and I thought, this is ridiculous. And I went into class and I asked my teacher, is there something I can do to kind of reverse the energy that I'm using? And she said, well, trees, absorb carbon dioxide, all of that. I ended up starting an environmental club in high school, and really my path started there because that was the first time I realized I could take initiative. I started this club. We started competing in competitions. And that was really kind of the beginning of me starting things and taking something that I was really bad at and trying to help people understand how they could be better, I guess. And I did it for my own personal need. And so for the next 8 years, I really spent my time doing environmental work. I had no interest in the environment before that. Because of this, I ran the environmental club all throughout high school. I ended up studying environmental science in college and spending all of college creating an initiative to teach people about plastic water bottles, traveling the world, looking at water initiatives, and that's really where my interest was. About junior year, I took time off from school. So after my freshman year, I lived in Kenya. I lived in Luxembourg. I was doing research on water. When I was in Kenya, I started teaching in the education system. I went to do environmental research, realized that wasn't going to happen just because of the environment I was in. I ended up teaching in the education system, kind of fell in love with teaching and education, worked with other teachers in our village to create an education distribution company. So I'll make a long story short, but pretty much where we were teaching, there was one textbook to teach English. It was through HIV and AIDS vernacular vocabulary. So not a huge help when trying to teach people colloquial English. And so we ended up starting a company to help distribute more resources to our village, which was extremely rural. There are no paved roads. But again, use the resources we had to change the distribution system, and that's still going. So that was really exciting. When I came back to the States, I started working for an environmental startup in Boston, and really had just kind of caught the bug in Kenya, the startup bug, where I saw the informal economy. I saw all these women entrepreneurs, and that everyone was an entrepreneur. So came back to the States, started working for an environmental company, and just fell in love with everything about it.
That was Freight Farms, right?
That was, yeah. Worked, from when there was no product to seeing them raise money and just the entire process. And from there, I had to go back to school. So I ended up working for a different company where I could just work very part-time while I was in school, and kind of just kept doing that, and ultimately worked for about 4 startups while I was in college. So always enthralled in that startup community. The story, it's going much longer than you probably want. And then my junior year, I kind of was just getting annoyed sitting at a desk all day when I realized when I was in Kenya, when I was working at a startup, I just saw my impact so much larger than I did when I was sitting at a desk. So I took my junior year off. I knew I could graduate in 3 years. And I just moved to Boston, and I was working at a lab at MIT. And this is really where the company started, I was surrounded by brilliant people and no one knew how to open a retirement account. And financial literacy was something that I'd always talked about with my co-founder, who you know is my brother. And we probably had talked about how we wish we knew finance, but it was never a priority in the education system. Um, and so because I had taken time off and was working, I had time to do this. So we started working on it a little bit every day. And when I went back to school, I told people what I was working on, and everyone I told said, I need that. Like, I don't understand finance. I have no idea what compounding interest means. I don't have any idea what they were. I would say Roth IRA. They were like, what? And so that's kind of how it started. And I was still in school. And so we really just started to kind of get market validation for the first year, did pitch competitions, really talked to young people who ultimately are our users, who we build a product for. And because we are millennials, we're surrounded by our user base constantly, and we know what they're doing, we know what they could be doing. And so we're millennials building the product we wish we had. And those are some kind of pivotal moments that led to what we're doing.
I'm glad you mentioned, right there, that last part, something that really stood out to me on your site when you said it's built by millennials for millennials. And I think that's so important because there's a big gap when it's written by someone who's 50 or 60 and has been doing this. Why has that been critical for you guys, maintaining that voice?
Yeah, it is hugely critical. I think there's a couple things. I mean, right now, every financial company knows they need to change if they want to work with millennials, if they want to be able to engage with the next generation of financial decision makers. But right now, the people who run financial institutions, to be honest, are pretty much the exact opposite demographic of me, many times, like 3 times my age. It's a lot of old white men. And it's frustrating to think that they know what I want, and to know how I take in information, and to think that I trust financial services the way they do, and to think that the marketplace is even the same as it was 10, 20, or 30 years ago. Everything is different. I grew up in a really interesting time where I saw my dad get laid off in the recession. My generation trusts financial services, does not trust financial services, and thinks about decision making very different. And the options that people have today are so different than they were when our parents were making decisions. And the information online is just cluttered and filled with jargon. So I think it's extremely, it's key that we're building this product. The company jokes that I'm the dummy test. So we create something and then they run it through me and I'm like, oh, it's too many numbers, because I went to a liberal arts school because I didn't want to take a math class. Like, I was terrified of finance. So it's pretty key. And interestingly enough, my co-founder, even though we're related, is the exact opposite of me. His first word was money. He's been day trading since he was 15. He's just obsessed with
What kind
finance.
of siblings are you guys?
It's crazy. And we always joked growing up, we're like, how are we related? And then when we started working together, it was pretty comical. But yeah, we're very different. We definitely think about finance very differently. He has every fintech app on his phone. And so it's a really cool dynamic, I think. We also just think differently. He's much more kind of apt to do logistics, and I'm much more creative. I'm like, I want to do all these things. And he's like, okay, this is how much money you have to do that. So it's really nice.
I think it's important, and the work that you guys are doing is so meaningful, because when RDV was announcing that you guys have teamed up, some of the stats in that article were really startling. Only 24% of millennials say that they have basic financial literacy. And you see stats, and you guys actually just had a great table on this, that if you start investing early, the return, you can't even believe it.
Yeah.
And when you don't, you're at a serious disadvantage. But there's so many of us who, like you said, you hear some terms, and even when you look up the definition, I don't understand the words in the definition.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly what I saw. You can look online. The thing is, most people don't even know what to start searching for. The people using our product, they don't know what a Roth IRA is. They need help just kind of starting. Like, similarly to me, people start using these words and my brain just shuts off. Like, I don't know what that means. And it gets very scary, it gets very intimidating very quickly. And so we really, when we're building this product, going back to your last question, build that in mind. People aren't stupid. but we're never taught this. So to go from 0 to 60, you can't do that. You kind of have to walk people in and say, these are what certain concepts are, and you need to understand these before you can understand these bigger words. If you Google, I remember I Googled like something around investing, like just investment. And I think one of the things is it says, it uses the word ETF. And I'm like, how do I know what an ETF is when I don't even know the basics of investing to start? Yeah, and so I think it's really interesting. We can kind of break it down at a level where people say, okay, compounding interest, this is what this looks like. Compare it to something that a young person already understands and kind of build upon that and motivate people as they go.
And so tell me what the experience would be like if I went to the site. What happens when I get there? How are you guys going to help me?
Yeah. So as you probably saw, we launched a beta last year, and we're about to launch a new product in the next couple weeks. But what that really looks like is we start off, we ask people a couple questions. Just if we gave you $5,000 tomorrow, what would you do? Kind of see what people's values and priorities are. And based on that, we give you your number one place to start. You can start anywhere, but we're saying like, hey, you can refinance, you can build credit, you can opt into benefits at your first job, things like that, to really make it less intimidating and say, you might think there are 7,000 decisions you have to make right now, but there's really just one place you have to start. And on our website, you'll see we say, it doesn't matter where you start, just that you do. And it's making this little decision, and then you can kind of move forward that way. And so then let's say you're in your first job and you want to learn about your benefits. Then you walk through a series. So I'll get really granular, but pretty much we've created an educational pedagogy to help people empathize with their future self, understand that they can make a decision based on their values, but also what does that look like? So an example is you might graduate from graduate school with $60,000 debt, but you still want to travel. So making a decision based on your values, but knowing what does it look like if I pay off my debt now versus in 5 years, something like that. And so then there's a series of videos, animations, little chunks of information. And as you go, you can fill in information to make the journey more personalized to you. So based on whatever you're going through and your values and your decisions, we help you understand what your options are. And so you can learn as little or as much as you want. Whenever you feel comfortable, you can click take action and see what you have access to in today's financial marketplace.
And you guys ran a poll a couple of weeks ago asking whether or not people prefer to learn on mobile or on desktop, and the response was overwhelmingly mobile. How are you responding to that as a team?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because when we do testing and, with our last product, we sat down with 100 people and we literally watched them use our product and we watched where they had pain points. And when we talked to people, we would say, do you typically like to do online education, or do you like to do your online education on a desktop or on mobile? And everyone says desktop when you ask them. Mm-hmm. But I said, I don't think that's true. I think that when people think about online courses, they think about watching it on their laptop, but that's not an experience that people necessarily enjoy. And ultimately, we're changing the way people think about finance. We're changing the way people learn finance. And for that, it's really important that you go to where people are and they're on mobile. So it's really interesting that people said that when they were on Twitter, because that was kind of our thesis, that when we ask them in person, they say, oh, well, I'm used to watching, Coursera online or on my laptop. But when in reality, you're probably sitting on the T doing this, or, have some free time and you're scrolling through. So that was just a brief question. We just wanted to see what people were on at the moment.
I love that you mentioned that, though, because it shows that you really can't take feedback for face value. You have to see, how someone actually performs, or what are they going to do in 6 months. What are some other lessons you've gleaned as a founder thus far?
Oh, man. Well, just around kind of hitting on that, it's extremely interesting. We're always categorized as fintech, and we are fintech. We're what I like to say, we're the best of edtech and the best of fintech. But when people think about fintech, they still kind of think of that ugly numbers, financy side, and we're creating algorithms for trading. And what's really interesting is that we're not doing that. We're creating a product for people to learn finance, and the people who are teaching are scared of finance. And so we don't want to build a fintech product, even though we're categorized as fintech, which is why we don't like kind of put ourselves into that box. We take best practices from other industries that people love, like travel, like fashion, and bring that to our space. And so an example there's a lot of examples I give of other kind of products in the space that we're much more similar to than a finance product. Because if I was building a finance product, my market wouldn't like it. But if you're building a product around a topic that people like, then people will like it. So that's kind of similar to the education. Like, people only know what they know. So if you're used to learning on your computer, that's the answer you're going to give. But maybe you just haven't had the experience of being able to learn on mobile yet, and that's what we can create.
How about on the other end of things, not necessarily learning, what are some challenges you faced as a founder this time around? Because you founded many ventures before.
Yeah. So, and also, I mean, there's a million lessons I've learned. That's one interesting thing. Challenges, it's interesting. I actually think that the biggest challenges are micro deterrents that happen on a daily basis. It's not even like competition. It's not these things that people from the outside assume are challenges. For me, it's really these little things that happen on a daily basis that kind of put a deterrent in your way. Yeah, so I mean, just an example I think is like, it's a random example. When we filed our name, the state of Delaware filed our name with an extra letter by accident. It was just a human error. And so it was just a micro deterrent that held up all these other things that couldn't happen. So that's a huge challenge, but things like that happen on a daily basis. And you can expect certain things. You can expect that other companies are going to be like, oh, this is a really good idea. I want to do that also. And when we started, no one was doing this. Now a lot of people are trying. I think that's amazing, because think about how many beings there are. Like, everyone needs to learn finance, and so there's just a giant market. And it's only validation that so many companies are spending so much money trying to do this. But the biggest challenges are the smallest ones that just put a little deterrent in your day that make what you could have accomplished a little bit less.
I think that goes back to that, and I always love it when I talk to founders and they say, you know, I was also the head dishwasher in charge for the first 5 years. And there's so many things that you just have to do as a founder because no one else is going to do it. That's life at a startup. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite part of that?
I always tell people, like, most days, you know, you're the janitor and the queen in the same hour. That's what I tell people. Yeah, and it's interesting now hiring people. When I hire people, I tell them, I'm like, I know you have an MBA from whatever, this amazing school, but if you want to work at a startup, you're going to not just be able to do this, you're going to have to do all of this that comes before that top part. I mean, my favorite part of that, I think, is my favorite part in general is just that I'm changing something that's so important. That's something that's ubiquitous to everyone, no matter who you are. You have to make financial decisions. So there are little things. There are big things you have to do on a daily basis. I'm trying, at this point, everything kind of just like, nothing is above or below you, right? Like, one day I'm meeting with the CEO of some huge company, Oracle. This happened. And then the next day you're picking up the pieces. Yeah, it's really funny.
I think it's great because my friend has a really, I think, on-point quote that always resonates with me when I share it with her. She says, you know, the outcome is never guaranteed, so if you dismiss the process, you lose the magic.
And I like that. Send that to me. Yeah.
I'll send it to you, and I think it's great because sometimes the best moments are at 2 a.m. when the whole team is there and you're gearing up for a release, or you get one customer email on a day when you need it, and you're just like, oh, you know, it's all worth it.
Yeah. We have an investor. He built $1 billion company, and every time I meet with him, he has just really interesting life lessons, and he says, you can't fail. He's like, you can't fail because either you're going to build a huge company and whatever, have a liquidation event and great, and that's success, and that's what most people define as success, or you're going to have this amazing experience where you learn so much in such a little amount of time. And it's really true. Like at this point in my life, that's how I feel. Like I can't fail. I'm also fighting a really good fight. Like, I don't know, in some sense, like I'm not building technology to help whatever, some like random thing that most people don't care about. I'm doing something that has a huge social impact on everyone. And so if that makes a little impact in 10,000 people's lives, if that makes a huge impact on 1,000,000 people's lives, I can't lose at this point. And then the amount that I'm learning, there's no other thing that I can do right now that would allow me to learn this much. Meet such amazing people, meet such passionate people who are starting companies, such successful entrepreneurs who have sold companies, amazing investors and advisors. Like, there's just no other time when I would be exposed to that much. So I feel pretty lucky.
There is something about it, it comes alive, I imagine, in the Rough Draft Ventures community. I hear about it all the time. But when you're with entrepreneurs, you're with like-minded people, they just see the world differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you gleaned any pieces of advice recently or a great piece of feedback that was shared with you that really stayed with you?
Ooh, so much. Yeah. Okay. So, my brother started saying this all the time, but he got it from someone who mentors him a lot and who I am a huge fan of and runs a huge millennial media company, and is nice enough to help us out sometimes. He said, wait, oh no. It's something, I'm going to mess it up a little bit, but you'll get the gist. Okay. It's like 99% is a bitch, but 100% is easy. And if you give 99%, if you give 99%, there's always this little like kind of crack where there's room for, there's room for you to slide through, I guess. But if you just commit 100%, then you don't. And there's a really interesting video I can send you about this. But I was just watching it the other day because I was in Boston for the weekend. My friend who I've known since 5th grade came up to visit. I haven't seen him in a long, long time. And I hung out with him, and then all my friends were going out at night, and I wanted to go, except that I have a huge presentation this week that I had to get done. So I couldn't go out with all of them. And I was sitting in my room on Saturday night doing work at 10:30, and I was looking at this video that says 99% is a bitch, 100% is easy, because I know that I'm committed 100%. I can't go out. It sucks. But at this point, like, the company is so much bigger than myself that I can't go out one night and sacrifice other things. Same with today. We had a practice for our demo day presentation, and today in Boston is Marathon Monday, so big day in Boston, very fun. I could not be there because we had a presentation. But knowing that you give 100%, you don't even have to think about it. You say, well, I want to do this, but I just can't right now. So that's something that I heard recently. I have some of my own favorite quotes, but that's something that recently I keep just thinking of because I've had to give up a lot. I gave up, interestingly enough, my senior week. When I was a senior, I was on the senior week planning committee, but we ended up getting into the finals of this competition, and it was in DC, and I had to go to it happened to be the entire week of my senior week, and so I missed the entire thing. But is that ideal? Not necessarily, but we ended up winning, and besides that, like, I just knew that I had to be there. Like, there's no question in my mind. I'm not giving 99%, I'm giving 100%, which means that I can't slide through the crack. I have to go. So anyway, that's it.
I love that one, and I'd love another one of yours. If you said you have
another
a couple.
One of mine. Yeah. My favorite one is that I tell people all the time is if we wait until we're ready, we'll be waiting for the rest of our lives.
No pressure there, folks.
I think about that all the time. If we wait until we're ready, we'll be waiting for the rest of our lives. I think there's so many deterrents that you can put in your own way when you want to do something. Like, you could say, in a year I'll have more money, in a year I'll have more stability, in a year I'll have more experience. But in a year you can make all those same excuses and more again. And people look for this optimal time to start a company. Guess what? There is no optimal time. I was a junior in college. I had no money saved. I had no extra time. I had no experience in what I was doing. But, like, everything was going against me. I'm a young woman in fintech. My parents wanted me to get a job to support myself. There was really nothing pushing me forward except that I just had this I was so compelled to do this that I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I couldn't imagine. I had this comfy job in Boston that I had an offer for, and I told him no. I said, I have to do the startup. This is the time. Um, and yeah, and so that's my advice to people. I think like in no way, not everyone is cut out to start a business. Like it's extremely hard based on just the things I told you. Like you have to give up a lot. Your friends are not going to understand. There's so many deterrents in general, and there's even more deterrents when you're young, and there's even more deterrents when you're a woman. But if you're gonna do it, then do it, you know? So.
And you've shared that before in a past interview, I think either this year or last year, that your favorite quote is "Love many things." And this is the time to explore. I'm curious, Rebecca, when you're not working, which I'm sure is not very much of the time, what do you read and study to learn and get better?
Ooh, yeah, I'm a big reader. What do I read and study? So that isn't necessarily my favorite quote, but it was on like a planner that I had. Mm-hmm. I always get planners with motivational quotes like, this is my planner right now. My planner right now is today is the day.
I love that.
But my planner last year said, love many things. Because no one would have expected that I would be running a finance company right now. In college, I was like the environmental person, you know, and I'm just really passionate. The things I read, I've always just loved nonfiction, so I've always read a ton of nonfiction. I have a library in my room of books. Right now, I love Adam Grant. He just wrote the book Originals. I really like his work. I mean, obviously love Sheryl Sandberg. I don't know if that's like too cliche. But I read a lot of nonfiction, behavioral economics, things like that. Just looking at how people make decisions. I'm always reading a book. And now I listen to a ton of podcasts. And especially it takes me an hour to get to work, and just if I'm in Boston, and then if I'm commuting to New York, it's even longer. So the other day my bus from New York took 6 hours because of the traffic, and I listened to 6 1-hour long podcasts called The Things You Should Know. Yeah. So I listened to a lot of podcasts about startups and also just like interesting things like why certain people have a tendency to like broccoli and certain people don't. I think if you saw in my Twitter bio and my normal bio, I think I love to learn. So I've always kind of loved to take in information.
So last one for you, and I'm always really interested about this with people. Would you say that some of the random stuff you learn, why people like broccoli, I always get fascinated with the whole cilantro thing. Either you love it or you hate it.
Yeah. It's similar. It's a similar thing.
How do you feel like that influences your work? Because I think it plays a critical role.
You mean just around learning?
Just around learning in general, not necessarily just studying fintech all the time.
Yeah. It's hugely critical because when you're starting a company, it's pretty much a series of experiments. You always have to be learning. You're doing something that's never been done before. And that's why it's so hard, because the world says everything should be this way, and you're saying, no, this can go this way. Another quote I love, you shouldn't, whatever it's about, like, just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it can't be changed, something like that. It's been a long day. It's nighttime here. Yeah, I think you have to love learning in some capacity, because that's really what you're doing. You're learning from your customers, you're learning from your users. And it's not just learning about the space, it's learning about how people feel about making a certain decision. It's learning about how people interact. It's learning about how your team interacts with each other, team dynamics. It's learning about how to hire, about how to fire. Like, there's so many things. You're always learning things that you just would never even think that you don't know. Yeah.
I love that, and I think it's such a great way to close, as you know, an encouraging thing for all of us to go learn something new today, whether it's at work, whether it's a personal thing, because it really does impact you. What's the best way, Rebecca, for everyone to stay up to date with you and stay up to date with your team?
Ooh, okay. Well, our Twitter is at LearnLux, at LearnLux. You can sign up to be on the next product release at LearnLux.com. We're launching a new website soon, but either way, you'll get the updates. We send out some funny millennial emails, but really just like once a quarter to not bombard people. And yeah, those would be two of the best ways. My own Twitter account is Best of Becca, which I don't know how I got. Somehow I got that. And yeah, those would be some of the best ways. And I don't know if anyone happens to be watching this, I give a lot of advice to young people looking for jobs. I think that if you want to work at a startup, this is unsolicited advice, but if you want to work at a startup, mine or any, I think if you reach out directly to a founder or one of the co-founders and tell them how you can add value, they're not going to say no. Just something that a lot of people ask me. They're like, how do I get in touch with you? And I'm like, reach out and tell me, like, I looked at this and I think I could add value in this way. I'll take a meeting, Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much.